story about a hiker that was being menaced by a bear, I probably wouldn't consider a bear to be a monster per se. It would be the antagonist in the story. It wouldn't be the bear, or it wouldn't be a monster. Now, of course, you can say, well, isn't isn't Hannibal Lecter a human monster? Well, yeah, if you want to use the term that way, but that's not the way I typically think. I don't think of those characters as monsters per se. Although, if you want to use the word that way, there's certainly nothing wrong with it.
All right, and Will?
I think of monsters as kind of, exaggerated negative metaphors for various behaviors of humans. All of those great, kaiju movies about, here's our, horrible environmentalism gone awry, and our nuclear, ambitions gone awry, and even Hannibal Lecter is psychology gone awry. So I always think of monsters as kind of these metaphors that we exaggerate into kind of the most negative, like, oh, is that what you think is good? Well, here's what, some more of that should be better, right? And so we show you the, no, you're right, no, stop there, we don't want that. So I always think of monsters as kind of being kind of those exaggerated factors of negativity.
Don't let me scare you.
No.
This is my Baba mask. Baba is the monster in my third horror movie. And he is more like a Frankenstein's monster than a kaiju, but very much similar. I know how you mentioned Hannibal Lecter, and that embodied, like, when I think of monsters, I think of bad, I think of evil. And when I think of Frankenstein and Godzilla, I don't. Frankenstein's monster was retaliating from a scientist that had a God complex. And I felt the monster's pain. And I think a lot of people did. And even when Mel Brooks did jokes on Frankenstein's story, because I would just say he is probably the first monster in popular culture to something to be called monster. And I didn't see him as bad. I see him as probably able to do things that we would consider bad, like he did kill the young lady, but his intention was not the same as Hannibal Lecter. His intention was not the same as probably like what we see evil people, and so I think there is an element of monster that can go left and right in terms of their origin story, their purpose, their reason. So I don't know. I mean, I say that because one of the things that I always end up debating on social media is Thanos, right? Is he an extreme environmentalist, or he is just a madman, And I don't know the answer. I know his manifestation in the MCU, maybe in the comic books it might be something different.
It is.
Right. and also because they had a lot more time. But then I'll look at a character like Darth Vader, and because his story was so PG, they never really showed his extreme measures to achieve his power until Rogue One. And then he was like, oh, there's the Darth Vader. Now he's ripping arms apart, throwing lightsabers in people's necks. That's Darth Vader. I told you he was bad. But for 3 movies, he was just James Earl Jones' voice guy. He was a bad father who never told his son, or probably didn't know he had a son. So you almost had a little sympathy, but then they turned the heat up. Let me just say this. Let's roll to our next question. I like your definitions of monsters. I'm going to ask you pick one of your monsters that you've written, right? How did you go about formulating that monster? Did you think of the origin story, or did you think of the actions that they may have undergone? Did you do anything special? Anybody, I don't really care. Will, you can start it off. You answered the last question. I don't care who wants to go first? But tell me some of the things that you went through. I have a story about Baba that I would like to tell as well.
Well, one of my earliest novels was a vampire novel, and the idea of the vampire. This was like, you know, when Anne Rice really hit big. It was before the sparkly vampires and all that. Well before that, but it was
this
like,
one when they were scary vampires.
No, but it was when they stopped being scary vampires. That's my point. It's like Anne Rice, you know, was writing these kind of more sympathetic treatments of vampires. You had Chelsea Quinn Yarborough's Saint Germain stories.
Fred Saberhagen's.
Yeah, Saberhagen's Dracula. There was, I think maybe Pia Elrod had already started to do the stories about her vampire PI. So I really wanted to write a book that would put, the scariness and the nastiness back in vampires, and kind of the accursedness of the vampires. So, you know, a vampire is something you would never want to be.
Right.
And so I had this, the conceit of the book was that this, you know, kind of disaffected kind of sci-fi fan, sort of young man, you know, wants to be turned into a vampire so that he gets superpower, he can be immortal, all this good stuff. And he finds this master vampire who will convert him, and after conversion he finds out that being a vampire is horrible. He's this, you know, kind of living corpse that's in constant pain, and that even though he can make other people see him as normal, and when he has to like basically kill somebody, you know, pretty much every night to feed and all this kind of stuff, and it's really awful. But anyway, he's not the villain. He's actually the protagonist of the story. The villain is the older vampire who is basically in the same boat and cruelly makes humans into vampires who think they want to be vampires for the sadistic pleasure of them finding out how awful it is. And
so instead of killing them, he turns them into vampires. And like,
yeah, it's like you thought that was going to be great, and it's horrible. And you thought I would be like your mentor and take care of you, but I'm just casting you adrift. Wow. And to fend for yourself. And I thought that was a pretty powerful, interesting, monstrous figure. And I had, and of course, I gave him a backstory that explained that, you know, he was basically perpetuating the cycle of abuse because he hadn't liked being turned into a vampire and what it was like in the centuries since. So he was like, well, I'm going to take it out on all these mortal chumps.
Okay, and how about your mechanics?
All of the monsters are human at some level, and the one that I'm thinking about right now is I wrote a story called Night Fever, where instead of being released in 1968, Manson was released in 1978, and instead of becoming a heavy guru, he becomes a disco guru, which sounds like a great comedy setup, and there is a little bit of humor there. But the whole thing with that was, you know, people always talk about how Manson is kind of the logical consequence of the 60s, the hedonism of it. Like, of course there would have to be a Manson.
Free spirit, free murder.
You know, and I don't agree with that. I mean, I think there could be a Manson in any era at any time, and that's part of the reason I wrote this, was kind of a repudiation of that, like a defense of the 60s. Like, no, he's not just there. He could be anywhere. He could just as easily have been a disco person. You know, so in that case, of the mechanics of him as just a person, you know, it came down to knowing his basic fundamental flaws and psychological things of, you know, being manipulative, being extremely self-centered, being interested in being popular and loved. Instead of wanting to be a musician, he wants to be a DJ at clubs in Manhattan and stuff like that. And so, you know, a lot of research had to go, like...
Does he kill people?
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, no, he does the same thing he always does, which is have other people kill people.
Okay.
You know, so you have...
For his pleasure.
Yeah, essentially. So, or his ends, at the very least, his gain. And so you essentially have, you know, he builds the same kind of scaffolding for his current followers as he did the ones in the 60s. You know, it's all about, you know, again, Night Fever. You know, we have Night Fever. We're the only ones who understand what it really means to be alive, and we're going to kill the ones who don't, and blah, blah, blah. So essentially what that came from was the era. You know, the monster no monster, I think, exists outside of their era or time or their place. You know, and so in that case, I had to think of, okay, I grew up in New York in the 70s, so I know, okay, here's what New York was like in the 70s. Pretty brutal, pretty scary. It's kind of surprising there wasn't somebody made like that, you know. what's interesting about this story is, you know, it fits really, really well. Like, it's just, I mean, you could just, you know, he basically was a parasite on pop culture, whatever time or place he was in. And what's really funny about this story is that lots of younger folks come up to me and they're like, wow, you created this incredibly memorable guy, this Charles Manson. And I'm like, no, he's a real human being. And they're like, wait, what? And that's what's the most horrifying part of it, is that this killer who looms so large over the imaginations of people for decades is starting to be marginally forgotten. Like, there are people who come up to me and are literally like, yeah, you did a great job with that guy. Wow, that's some crazy shit. And I'm like, yes, it is some crazy shit, but it's not my crazy shit entirely.
Maybe Tarantino will keep Charlie in the public imagination for a little longer.
I'm sure he gets told, wow, who is that guy? That's some crazy stuff.
I like both of your approaches to monsters as almost a political response to what you saw that was out there. I don't feel so bad as so. I'm gonna go next on that, so you can follow me. But I like that element. When I went to create Baba, it was sort of in retaliation to Candyman. I had remember going to Spooky Empire, right? And I saw everybody dressed up as Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, and I was like, dang, where's diversity? This was the time that Luke Cage was out, and I was like, yes, he took off the tiara, and I was ready to be Luke Cage. But this was a horror convention, so I was like, okay, I'm a cosplay, where do I fit in? And I was like, I'm not wearing a regular black guy outfit with a hook hand. That's not, you know, that just is not cosplay.
It's hard to do the bees, too.
Right, so, I mean, the bee's chest, but he doesn't really expose that until he's about to kill you, you know? So I said, we need a diverse character, you know, that's in a mask. And so I thought of this character, and I went through and I kind of took some frustrations of not necessarily a real character, but a potentially real character. I found a little history on barnyard boxing and how Africans during slavery were made to fight each other. And it wasn't so subjugated as portrayed in Quentin Tarantino's Django, because a few of them were able to win their freedom. And they fought before, you know, around the birth of America, 1776, all the way up to 1815. They won their freedom and fought all around the world. One particular guy won his freedom, and he was fighting in Australia and died in Ireland. And I was like, this is during the heat of slavery. Oh my God, that was amazing. So I wrote this character. I made the barnyard boxing a little bit of WWF. And he's a, you know, over-the-top wrestler called the African King, made it real WWF, racially stereotypic, and he would go through all these things. He's fighting the wild Irishman, he's fighting the Native American chief, and all things are good, and then he approaches a tragedy. The guy who's negotiating his contracts gets killed, and he gets taken back into slavery. And it's a 6'8" guy who they use as a stud. And he doesn't take to being a stud very well. And almost like John Coffey in Green Mile, he's a little punch drunk, right, a little simple. And he rejects it, and then they lynch him. You know, he's accused of raping the owner's daughter because he refuses to engage with her. And he gets lynched and tarred and all that. And that's how he's buried. And so in my story, he comes back to life. And now he goes Freddy Jason on everybody. Because he's mad at the world, he's mad at the black people for not protecting him, he's mad at the white people for falsely accusing him, and he's just a mad person. And I kind of approached it in the politicalness of setting him up, but then I used other principles to kind of put him out there because I struggled with motive for evil, you know, whereas you have him set in an evil place, but you gave one of the vampires an origin of having been scorned himself as why he would do it. And I don't know if you got into Manson's origin, or did you recreate that?
I just kind of shifted it 10 years where, you know, he wanted to be famous, he wanted to be beloved, he wanted to have people who knew his name and cared about who he was as a person. And so he was after fame and after notoriety. And so, yeah, that's the same.
And real people, sometimes there's just no answers for them. Sometimes with real people, it's like, okay, he was bad. Amon, how did you, you know, what are your monsters? It doesn't have to be anyone specific. Anyway.
I did it'll be a trilogy. I'm writing the third book now called Chelsea Avenue. And it's based on New Jersey, Long Branch, New Jersey, which is around where I grew up.
I'm from Teaneck. Oh, yeah, okay.
So, 1987, there was a haunted pier on Long Branch. June 8th, 1987, it caught fire and burned down. And at the same, which is a real thing, and at the same time, there's a club right around the corner on Chelsea Avenue, heavy metal club.
Club 12?
Murphy's Law,
okay.
Which is next to Strutter's, which is a strip club. And we used to go not to the strip club. I'm gonna say the strip club. We used to go to the club there all the time, and then that eventually burned down as well, but a few years later. So I created where the fire was created, and these elemental gods basically are battling to come into the world, and the water god basically tries to ascend at that point, and his three brothers stop it. But every year on that date, he gains the most power to get back into the world. And then these people, whoever survived the fires, if the goal is for him to kill these people or have his minions kill these people, and he gains more power. So it starts in 1987, and the last book now I'm in, like 2015, 2016 is when it starts. So every year on that date, we move along, and while he is the main monster, it's the people that are doing things around him. The people are trying to survive, and also the people that are working for the monster without realizing humans being manipulated by the monster to basically try to bring people back to what is now a vacant lot and basically sacrifice them for him to gain more power.
I play a card game called Spades, right? And sometimes people get real bold when they play spades, they lead with spades. I'm going to do the same thing and throw out a high card question. So this question might just ruin the whole panel because I might not be able to ask any more questions after this question, but it's burning on me. It's the Joker question, right? Familiar with Joker, the movie that's breaking all these records?
I have not seen the movie. I'm very familiar with the comic book character.
Right, yeah. But you are familiar with the movie's success?
Yes, that I am.
Okay, so not spoiling the movie, but dealing with the movie itself as a monster's story. If we accept the Joker as a psychopath, right? Sure. As a monster, yes. And this being his origin story. My burning question is, of course, what do you think about, monster stories being successful and embraced? There was a point in his story, the Joker, that I understood. I laughed and cheered a couple of times when he killed people. Although at the end of the movie, I felt like any monster, dude, that's not the way to react, Go to jail, you bad person, Do you think a monster story can be too successful? And not just box office success, but in success of creating compassion, success in creating understanding, and success in creating followers and groupies. This is some of the things that they were thinking about the Joker would do, in terms of being a successful film. I know now Brightburn, that was another superhero going awry, but I don't see anybody saying, oh, I'm Brightburn. A couple kids been cosplaying, but they're not going to go Brightburn. Yeah. But,
well, first you need to be able to fly, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
But, what do you call it? Other stories like The Taxi Driver. I wrote a story called Gold Digger Killer, and she kills the people that raped her and goes on a murderous rampage. But there's the 70s stories, right? Carrie, you think of Carrie, she killed everybody at her prom because they bullied her. But do you think a horror monster story is dangerous if it becomes too successful? anybody.
I think it's very telling that these stories tend to crop up again when people are pissed off as a general societal thing. The 70s give you all of those really nihilistic movies, including, Taxi Driver, where, yeah, that resonated with people because you're like, I am sick of this shit. And yes, I do, or Dirty Harry for that matter, or any of those movies where you suddenly have a person who lashes out in a big dramatic way the rest of us can't. My hope of those movies being successful is that we watch them, we get that cathartic, flush of, wow, that would have been,
Get it out of our system.
Yeah, for the 30 seconds after I shot that person who cut me off in traffic, that would feel amazing. And then for these 60 years afterwards, when I was in prison, it would really suck, But fortunately, I can skip that part because I have just watched it on a movie. That is my hope for those movies. I always wince whenever anyone is worried about imitators and things like that, because of course we have people who imitate all sorts of things, including the Bible, who take a lot of things that they've been told and given and go completely haywire with them. And I had a lecture for our high school students about horror and our responsibility as horror writers. Should we shy away from things that get people wound up? And again, I think our function is we're giving you the simulation of what happens when those things get wound up, so you don't have to do it yourself. That's kind of that's my view of it.
It's a release.
Yeah. We turn the valve a little bit, let the steam come out, let enough steam come out to give us some energy behind the story, and then, that's my view.
A lot of times it's just the things that we are thinking of. That person cuts you off in traffic.
So it's almost like an analogy of sorts.
It's the easy way. It's the easy way to do. I always joke that I'm happily married now, but I was divorced twice, and I've killed those two bitches a million times in stories.
Thank God.
And for me, it's that funny. But you go back to that, I didn't kill them in real life, I swear, but
You wouldn't be sitting here.
right. It's
so
so
bad.
bad. If you gotta find the bodies first.
Right?
But it's that release. You watch those characters, but I think also if you can relate in some way to those characters, a monster that's just ripping people apart, or you can't relate to that a lot of the time. But if it's got some human elements, as crazy as the Joker is and everything, there are some elements that anybody can relate to with his origin story. So you find those little pieces and you relate to that monster a little bit more. And when he does the things that society doesn't want you to do, like rip people apart and stuff, it's that relief.
I want to. You made me think of two people, right? When I was listening to you, you made me think of you said human qualities, and I have a cat, right? And my cat does certain things. I'm like, I have a Siamese cat. He's spooked of everything. He hears my voice, he runs. When he wants something, though, I see him look at me, right? Godzilla had that same element in times. He had animal, they weren't human qualities, but they were animal qualities. And I'm not talking about the Godzilla one, which one? Oh gosh, the one that came from New York, the lizard Godzilla, not that one. The Matthew Broderick. We'll skip over that, right? But sometimes they don't necessarily have human qualities. They have animal qualities that humans can interpret and relate to. So I think that's a good thing. I did have something else I was going to say, but I'll follow you.
Okay, I agree with what has been said so far, but I would maybe add a little more that I wouldn't have added when I was younger. When I was younger, I would have just said, yeah, these horrific stories, they're good because they can focus our attention on something we should be paying attention to. They're good because they can provide catharsis. They're good because they broaden our understanding of the human psyche and the human condition. That's all I would say. Today, I think I would say, yes, I still stand by all that, but if we are going to take the attitude, and I suspect all of us here do, that art can influence human behavior for good, we have to acknowledge at least the theoretical possibility that it could influence human behavior for bad.
Yes.
And so, yeah, there can conceivably be some people out there who say, well, I'm going to be Hannibal Lecter too, or I'm going to be the Joker too, and act out on it. But then the question becomes, do we set the parameters of our society based on the least common denominator? It's like, if there are people who drive drunk and create harm, does that mean nobody can have a drink? Or nobody can have a car, you know? I would say no, in terms of the horror fiction, if there's one deviant person out there who's going to see the Joker movie and then put on clown makeup and go kill somebody, does that mean we shouldn't have the Joker movie? I would say probably no to that also.
I think, when you use the car analogy, right, I can follow that and say, well, we'll put seatbelts, right, and it will also give laws that, penalize people for driving drunk, and will give rules and regulations on how and when to drive. So you can't drive under the influence, you got to drive under a conscious mind. But the other question, and Ahmad, am I saying it right? You made me think, again, evil politically can be subject to interpretation. So one man's Joker is another man's V for Vendetta, and...
But I always look at him as a writer, the Joker doesn't think I'm this awful evil person. His angle is I'm the right one. I might be a little crazy, I might know I'm a little crazy, but overall I'm doing the right thing.
And so for me, the other character that you made me think of, I saw, I think it was yesterday, I'm old now, so it could have been Thursday, Maleficent, right? Yeah. And with Angelina Jolie. And I remember the first one, but I'll never really be able to speak on the first one, but I'll say, in the second one, here's this character billed as this bad person who has a bad rep. And in the story, she hasn't done anything necessarily bad. It's people perceiving her as a threat and then taking offensive aggression on her, and she's actually not bad. So I think of that when you said, the human qualities and those different elements. I think it can be subject to perception. Any other comments on that?
I was just going to say that, I wonder if Atlas Shrugged has done more damage in the world than Dracula. I wonder if giving a generation of sociopaths license to not care about other people with this wonderful rationalization Ayn Rand has given us is actually even more a monstrous thing than the Joker or any of those things. So it's funny to me that you don't know how your work is going to land. You know what's in your heart as you write it. You know what kind of you're trying to, what you're justifying it as, what you're going.
You think Ayn Rand didn't have that in her goal?
No, her goal was to, she had this whole utopian idea that I'm going to tell you something.
Because I think that's what she wanted to.
So I'm sure she was not thinking, well, you know what, she's a horrible human being, so she probably was.
Right!
Excellent, let's eat the poor. I'm sure who the hell knows, but she was thinking she's a horrible person. But, it's interesting to me that, the outrageously horrific is always in the target. It's always the, we can't let it, there's a gun in it, there's a guy in a mask, there's a person with a knife. But it's never the stories about people getting their lives torn apart by capitalism or whatever. Not that I'm not Marxist, I'm just saying whatever. There are lots of horror books out there that are not marketed as horror and do not shock people as much perhaps as they should. So I'm always, that's why whenever someone comes out and is holy shit, this is awful, I'm always like, where were you when when all these other books have come out and probably done far more to, Mitch McConnell has a copy of Atlas Shrugged on his desk, and how much of that is guiding the weird ass shit he does and he needs others to do, and it's just kind of one of those things where you're like, yeah, define horror, define monster, because, this is the easy stuff, right? This is the stuff that, you can point to and go, yeah, that's a monster, all right, but people are letting all the other ones slide by because they just don't want to engage with that in any kind of political way.
I got two comments, and I'll just make a question before the question. It is the second panel that when we're talking about monstrous things, that the climate in this country has come up. I'm just saying. Okay, go ahead, and then I got you.
And it was
But
really
it was
interesting.
appropriate.
It's really interesting you're talking about society's forgetting things. I'm a big history nerd. I love studying the Cold War and the history of the Soviet Union. I get a discussion online with a gentleman in Vietnam that's saying, you know, communism is great. Communism is wonderful. We need to have communism. I'm like, have you read anything about what happened in Ukraine in the 1930s when the communist government starved those people to death? Or Cambodia, where they took people out of their homes and said, you can't have money anymore, go work in the fields? And his response was, oh, that's not true communism. Communism is utopia. I'm like, no, dude, you're not understanding. Stalin was a monster. Stalin was the worst monster in Hitler. Stalin killed people. If not for nuclear weapons, we would have had World War III. Because Stalin needed enemies to stay in power. So it's interesting you guys talk about monsters and not just monsters. Monsters can be people too. And I'm a conservative Republican, don't shoot me. And when the issue of politics came up, I'd actually agree with you from comments amongst Trump needs to be impeached at this point. But it's interesting that we're forgetting certain aspects of history in favor.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, Mao's Little Red Book is a horror book. I mean, you know, there's lots of things that, you know, if you look at just the sheer horrifying impact of that book, the fact that some of the monsters kill people or not is not even, that's one of the lesser, I mean, you know, something, we get distracted, I think, by the violence and not think about, okay, what's the social violence, what's the, you know, the political violence that comes from some of these folks. Which again, I don't think we should ban them, I don't think we should tear Iran out of the bookstore. I'm just saying that if you're going to be going on a witch hunt, let's not neglect some other witches. You know, I mean, why are we gonna?
And you had a comment?
Yeah, the idea of the human monster, or what this, I think, to me, after listening to what you said, is not about their goal, but about their willingness to get there. Does the ends justify the means? When they're willing to do anything to get to their goal, that makes them a monster. Which brings us back to, you mentioned Frankenstein, and you said the monster was sympathetic. I think in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that's a misdirection. The monster isn't the monster.
Right.
Frankenstein's the monster.
Exactly.
Oh, I was just going to say that when you brought up Maleficent, I think that stories that say, you know, what you think is the evil is not really the evil can be really interesting. As far as, in my opinion, far and away the best of Joe Hill's horror novels is Horns, which is about a guy who wakes up and apparently has become a demon. And by the end of the story, it's like, well, he has become a demon, but you know, maybe we need demons. You know, maybe there's a reason to have a demon.
It's a cancer cell.
Yeah, the TV show Lucifer. You know, it's like it's about Lucifer, but he's not the Lucifer you think he is. You know.
Right. Did you have a comment on it? My next question I wanted to kind of explore along the lines of, because we're the creators of monsters, right? We're the writers, we're the ones that dream these things up. We're the ones that bring them to life. You know, I have characters talking in my head all the time, the good and the bad ones, right? And they all want to get written, especially when I start writing the story. They're ready to come out. One of the things that makes a monster is not only their intention, not only their ideology, not only their goal, but how they execute it. I know when I write my screenplays, when I start my story, I start thinking, all right, this is the goal, right? She's trying to rid the world of misogyny. I'm just using my story, Gold Digger Killer, as an example, right? Then I'd say, well, she can't Lorena Bobbitt 10 people. That's just going to become redundant. So I had to think of different manifestations. It'll be a player. She'll kill a pimp. She'll kill this and that. And I try to break it up. And then she'll use this weapon. And she'll make it at this encounter. Do you ever get concerned that not necessarily your monster, but your monster's means now can become too influential? You know, because I remember when Batman came out and we had the shooting in the movie theater. So when the Joker was coming out, I got this email. It was a letter, a formal letterhead said, you know, be careful when you go to the theaters, you know. And I'm saying to people, if you are just now having to be told to be scared to go into public places. We've seen shootouts in Times Square. We've seen shootouts in nightclubs. We've seen shootouts in public places from a Tourette. You know what I mean?
Elementary schools.
Elementary
Please
schools.
be careful in your elementary school.
Right.
It's a rough place.
Right. We have shooting drills in schools. You know what I'm saying? So at some point, you know, we should be we should have had some type of vaccination, right? We should be prepared for that. But then there's other things that I know you guys think of that could outdo some of the things that we're already prepared for. Do you ever get scared of thinking of an idea that's a kill scene or a bad scene that hasn't been done, that you're like, I don't know if I want to put that out there? You ever think of that?
Yeah, I lived in Washington, D.C. during 9/11, and about 2 weeks after it, I mean, D.C. was, of course, a madhouse. Anytime someone dropped a bottle of dish detergent in the metro, they would shut down the whole metro. And people were like, yeah, I mean, it was crazy. So, and then, of course, the snipers are around a little bit later then, and the anthrax shit starts up. So it was a terrifying time. But what's interesting is, you know, I was a member of the Horror Writers Association, and we had a meeting a couple of weeks after 9/11, and we're sitting in Brian Keene's house, actually, and we're chatting about, we're like, you know, there are so many low-hanging fruit things that terrorists could do to truly scare the shit out of people. You know, shoot up Disney World, shoot up a mall, send a guy in with a Kalashnikov to all these kinds of places, an elementary school. I mean, so it's funny, like
basketball.
Yeah. All of these things that, and we're talking, and we're all, and you know, and we're not. There's no glee in what we're saying. We're just sort of like, if your goal is to scare the shit out of people and get society in that thing, ironically, Manhattan might not even be your best target, you know. But then finally we kind of got to this point where we're all kind of like, holy shit, I don't believe we all thought of that. You know, I mean, we kind of got sick to our stomachs about talking about it.
Your critique turned on yourself.
Yeah, we're like, oh my God, what is wrong with us? Because yeah, you think about all these things that, all of the weaknesses and spots all around us where horror can leak in. You know, that's the part of the reason you write horror stories, is because you can say, it could happen, thank God it hasn't, but here you can have that experience without shrinking away from it. But yeah, I mean, I do think about that. I mean, now with the internet, you can find a bazillion ways to kill people and grow your own anthrax and whatever the hell else you want. Nobody's coming to mind. Well, it's not like the Anarchist Cookbook used to be. Remember when people were like, holy shit, the Anarchist Cookbook. I mean, first of all, 2/3 of the Anarchist Cookbook will kill you before you end up actually getting out of your house. But then secondly, you know, the fact is that there's way more, like, that horse has long fled the barn, and there's nothing I know more than they do, you know.
And today you can buy a CRISPR and create this super plague in your garage. Maybe.
Well, I think that's part of the problem, though, is that while we're coming up and we're creating all these fictional situations and stuff, a lot of this stuff is based on reality to begin with. A lot of this stuff is real. To me, that's the scary part. Like, I never shy away. I never write something and go,
Kaiju,
should I?
Where have you been?
Thank you.
But you even know the situations, all that are based on anything that we're writing is based on some reality in one form or another. It could be characters in the book and the way they interact with people, the way they treat each other. You know, you write zombie books and everybody suddenly becomes an asshole in every book, or you kill the zombies and you go on with society. But a lot of that stuff is based on stuff that we've read, stuff that we've been through, whatever, personal experiences. To me, that's the scary part. Charles Manson and what he did to people, that's the scary part. You know, without Charles Manson, you'd be just writing another book. But you actually have a foundation of non-fiction to actually write about. I read a ton of non-fiction because I get so many story ideas every time I read anything.
You were getting me to my next question, so I'm gonna footnote remember where you were just at? Don't worry. That's our next question. Yes.
I just wanted to add to what you're so right. I've been watching Forensic Files at night. They're horrible. They'll give you nightmares. They'll give you I mean, some of these things these guys have done, and you're like, I wouldn't dream of that. They're hideous, you guys.
We watch Investigation Discovery constantly. And there's always just sitting there, and I'm always like, oh, wrap the guy in chicken wire, and the body won't float. I mean, you find all these great things that you're like, because people are doing this.
You're like, no, I can't believe he's doing
The
it.
glorious thing is that so many people who find that as their only solution are so incredibly stupid. That's our only saving grace.
But that's good, because then we get all these stories.
Yeah, my mom would say that like being in Florida is like the perfect way to like be able to hide a body, because you could just like kill someone, put them in like a body bag, and then like weight it down and just like go out on a boat and just throw them in the ocean.
Rob them in chicken wire.
Yeah, feed them to the gators. You had, yes.
Yeah. When I saw they were alive.
I mean, I got one question.
And they were still alive.
I teach creative writing
Who was out here in Tampa?
in English.
Yeah.
And
I gave you that.
I do character development on different levels with students as they go up. And one of the hardest things for them to do is to design just classic monster. Set aside the human that is the monster, the villain, or whatever name you want to put on it, but just this is a creature that is a monster. And so I wanted to ask you, so what if you were giving young writers suggestions, or it's like, okay, this would kind of be your checklist to how to, some insight into creating a monster, because I give them the option of doing it, and 99.9% of the time, they end up doing a villain because they'll start out intrigued and they're like, oh my god, that's so difficult, and they back up from the monster part.
One thing I do for my students, and it's kind of modeled on essentially how they created the monster in Alien, which is, what's awful, what's creepy to you? Make a list. You know, acid, you know, snot, claws, wet things, squishy things, things with sharp teeth, things that have, that are kind of a little bit snake-like, but also, skeletal.
The word voice.
Yeah, and list those things out and think to yourself, well, how can I exaggerate that into some kind of creature that I can meld into something that's terrifying?
What terrifies you?
Yeah, exactly. That's essentially what poets, the kid who's terrified of spiders, you're like, awesome, what's the worst spider you can imagine? Okay, an 8-foot tall spider, that's fine or whatever, but what if you had, 10,000 tiny spiders or whatever? What if all of these abilities and things that they have that you can exaggerate to make them worse?
That's that machine gun.
Yeah. The whole tree, yeah, exactly. The whole key is take the thing that scares you the most and make it worse.
And it's easy to write that because you're writing from a place of honesty. You're definitely afraid of snakes or spiders or dogs or whatever it could be. It's really easy to tap into that. A guy who has a snake collection goes, oh, I got to write about a killer snake. He's going to write it from kind of a goofy perspective because he likes the snakes. But somebody who's definitely afraid of an animal or something, and it could end up being an alien. It could end up being this giant hybrid dog, snake thing, whatever. But you still have that actual fear of that creature, which makes it easier to write.
I'll piggyback that on what's been said with another suggestion, which is that if you're trying to design a creature and you want to come up with something, it's like somebody said, "Oh, it's a giant dog," or it's a giant spider. There's a lot of really bizarre shit about various living creatures in biology, and you go off and do some research on some of the animals that whatever that have really odd attributes. It could be fodder to come up with a different kind of creature.
You should partner with a biology teacher, to talk about the liver fluke, talk about tapeworms, talk about parasites, talk about the horrible things that the animals do just to live. That would certainly freak kids out, and probably, the biology teacher won't get out well from that because they won't want to be in this class anymore. But yeah.
And zombie ants, there's all kinds of stuff.
I would also say that all of what they said is really just the puzzle pieces of brainstorming. The story is what links all of those pieces together. Unlike real life, stories have to make some logical pattern. Right. Regardless of whether people say, oh, that's predictable or not. You can't be so unpredictable that it doesn't make sense. Like your character has to be characteristic. if the killings and the exploitations don't fit that characteristic, you can't. So like I said, when I think of my things, I say, okay, she's mad at the world. She's trying to rid the world of misogyny. What type of different people would I see her mad at? And pull each one together. Because if you have so much similarity, it will, again, not necessarily work. So I'll say that. Guys, we have, what, 3 more minutes before we clean the room out. Goes so fast. I talk a lot. I must ask good questions. But you guys are fantastic.
You're right, you deserve all the credit.
No, you guys are fantastic. I sit back and I'm listening to you, so I'm learning myself. Now, monsters past, monsters present, monsters future. Where do you think monsters are going? In terms, not themselves. Yeah, see, there we go, right? No, out of the White House. Let's get them out. Let's move that out. But where do you, let me build a little context. We've got digital filmmaking, we've got YouTube and camera phone accessibility, so everybody's making things. However, there's still a little element of that's too much realism. You know, you can't get so far. Like, I've seen horrible things that I would not want to see in a movie still in my DM. It's horrible. You know, there's no way I can imagine seeing it in a movie, maybe written in a book, but you're really relegating yourself to certain sections. So I think censorship is not going to be something external. I think it's something internal that is based on our comfort level, and I think we're adhering to it. So contrary to the communism of rules, I think our own personal comfort will be our realm of ruleism in the world of monsters and horror.
It's telling that in Fahrenheit 451 that, you know, before the firemen came, people stopped reading books. They chose not to read books. It wasn't imposed on them.
Right.
They just censored themselves, which is a creepy thing. Yeah.
So what else do you see in the future of monsters? Monster writing, monster creation?
I mean, you're going to get even more extreme. You're going to get those authors who want to continue to push that envelope. I'm not a fan of extreme horror at all.
Right.
I don't even watch horror movies.
Oh, even the Annabelles and the camera action horrors?
I feel like I've seen it all.
Okay.
You know, and I don't want to watch Human Centipede. I don't want to watch Hostel. I don't want to watch those, and I don't read that.
Crawl was good.
I do want to see Human Centipede the musical.
Oh,
no, really? I'd say Caligula was a horror movie. Have any of you seen Caligula?
yeah, probably the next day in the clinic.
I don't actually have any brilliant notions about the future of monsters, like where it's going to go, except I think that it's pretty much inevitable that climate change is going to be a bigger and bigger concern, and a fertile source of monsters will say, well, what kind of life forms could we have evolved that actually could live in this environment better than people?
They're melting in the tundra right now in Alaska.
The monsters are going to get smaller. Bacteria and viruses, things coming out of the Amazon as we burn it down, coming out of the ice.
Well, as we learn more science, as we learn more of these awful things that are real.
Everyone in this room is going to be killed by a monster for real.
You're welcome.
And it's just going to be microscopic. You know, you're not going to know it.
So you have something to look forward to.
Last question, everybody.
But in writing, you know, this gore and this shock and this kill, going back to actually H.P. Lovecraft, there would be all these situations, and you would put the pieces together in your mind what the monsters were doing, and you never totally saw the monster, or it was never totally described, but you could see the effects of what the monster or the individual that was the monster was doing, and it left some of that imagination to the mind. Is that a better scare tactic? than just saying, oh, he went in and he sliced them, you know, he quartered them and raw and quartered them and drained the blood into a 5-gallon bucket. You know, I think that's a better monster than one that just comes out and just kills, you know.
Well, I'll say this, I think that you're talking is technique.
Right,
and
right.
You can write it, and you can direct it, even draw it. So it depends on the monster, it depends on the story. But I want to thank everybody for being good monsters, right? And sitting through. I have cards for my movie. Please get one. Thank you very much, panelists.
Yeah, I gotta run to another town.
All right. The day has just begun.
Are you on that one?
Oh, yes. Yeah, you and I are at the hip. We're at the hip for the next 2 or 3 hours.
Okay,
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Bert and Ernie of Necronomicon. 3 o'clock riding horse.
Thank you.